Hello my friends, in this video let's talk about art marketing using storytelling to connect with your audience and your art.
My name is Sergio Gomez. I'm an artist, curator, gallery owner, author, and co-founder of the Art Next Level program. And my goal with this channel is to make marketing and art business easy so that you can grow your art career, find new opportunities, sell more art, and spend more time creating in the studio. So if you like that, make sure you click on the subscribe button and click on the little bell so that you receive notifications of our future videos.
Hello my friends, super happy to connect with you. In this video I want to talk to you about art marketing and how to craft your story and elements of your story when you talk about your art so that you can use it in your marketing, and by doing so you will have a much better chance to connect with people and to connect them to your art, because the stories is one of the best ways to sell your art, to promote your art, to market your art, to find your art, the right audience for your art, is through the elements of storytelling. So I'm going to tell you my story framework that I use, which is my branding framework that I use to create any type of story for my marketing. So we're going to do that. I'm going to walk into my studio, into my art gallery, and we are going to look at all the elements of storytelling as art marketing. So one of the things that I want to talk about here, and we're going to use these two pieces as an example, is the idea of art marketing. Sometimes we have a hard time because we feel that this marketing is something sleazy, something like too commercial, too salesy, and it doesn't have to. When you use storytelling in your art practice, in your art career, for your marketing, things become a lot easier. Sending an email becomes a lot easier. Putting an Instagram post becomes a lot easier because you know what to say, because you have a better way of connecting the audience through your art. So I want to help you with that today. The first thing we want to talk about is why storytelling. What storytelling, I find it to be, is one of the most beautiful ways that we as human beings use to connect with each other. Before we had social media, before we had YouTube video, and before we had anything, the first people who were walking on earth, they used stories. They told stories to each other, and then stories were passed on from generation to generation, and that's how people communicated. That's how they remember things. That's how they celebrated each other, right? Through the stories that were told. Today, if you go to the movies, they say on the big screen, turn your phones off, right? Because you don't want to distract somebody else, from watching the movie, from missing out on the story that's being told on the big screen. And that is amazing, right? So there's something beautiful about storytelling. Art in itself, is storytelling through visuals, through imagery, right? So I find that, it just comes totally natural for us as artists to think about storytelling as a way of marketing our own art. Now, I talk to a lot of artists who say, well, Sergio, I just want to make the art and let people figure out, let people, find the meaning. And I totally agree with that too. By saying storytelling, I'm not saying, do not let people discover your art or find their own meaning. Actually, I find that as an artist, if I tell people the meaning of the art, then I am actually robbing them an opportunity to engage with it, right? Because I'm giving them away, the exact meaning of what they're looking at. So I find that actually I don't want to give them the meaning. I just want to give them just an entry point, just like first steps for them to kind of walk into the door. Think of it of here, this gallery, right? So here's our art gallery. We are in South Florida. So when somebody walks in this door, I welcome them. I say, hey, thank you so much for coming. I tell them a little bit about the gallery just in a couple sentences, and then I'm letting walk in and discover for themselves what we have, right? That's exactly how I feel about storytelling for your art. You just want to say a few things to make people connect, with you and with the work, and then let them walk into discover the art. So, and that leads me to, what I call my art branding framework, which is very simple. The branding framework that I use, and then I'm going to tell you, how that applies to talking about my art, creating a story about my art. but it's the art branding framework that I've been using for the last few years, that I've been also teaching artists from around the world about this framework. It's very simple. It's a three-part framework. Imagine a triangular shape, right? A triangular shape or a pyramid. In the middle of the pyramid is your art. At the top corner of that pyramid, you can put the word story, my story. You have a story, I have a story. And by story, I mean, how did you become the artist that you are today, right? In my story, there are specific moments in time that are special to me. One, for example, when I moved from Mexico to the United States, or when I went to high school and my high school teacher asked me, why don't you become an artist? That was the first time somebody actually recognize the art that was in me. So that's a marker, right? Something that was special, and etc. Or I can look back at the last 25 years, 30 years of my life and find different markers or different points in my story that have been important to me, that make me the artist that I am today. Some good things and some bad things. For example, I had a really difficult disease that I went through for a while. I couldn't make art for a whole year. So that's part of my story, that also allowed me to see things differently. When my kids were born, that also changed my life and the way I make art, right? It inspired me in new ways. So, that's part of my story. So think about, what is your story? Write down what are the highlights, the key points that make you the artist that you are today. So that's the first step in your artist brand framework that I'm sharing with you. Then after that, that's at the top. Then in another corner of that triangular shape, you're gonna put my influences. Who has influenced you as an artist to be the artist that you are today? From the history of art, from former professors, teachers, or other people that you have met, or circumstances that you have lived that have really influenced the art that you make. For me, I have many people that have influenced me over time. One in early in my career, and that kind of like was what gave me like the love for drawing, which a lot of my pieces start as charcoal drawings actually. um, these two have charcoal as well. And for me was Jim Dine. Jim Dine was a New York based artist, was highly also celebrated in the 20th century. Wonderful artist, contemporary artist, and I love his drawings. I remember I was in art school and I looked, at the library in the school, and I will pull out, and I would also request from other libraries drawing books by Jim Dine, and they really inspired me. Particularly his charcoal drawings. So that kind of was awakening in me, a love for drawing. So that was one of my influences, and I have more, right, that I can tell you about. And then on the other corner is your values. What is it that you value as an artist? Right? What is it that you value as an artist in your art career? And when you find what you value in your art career, as an artist, then you can talk about those things, right? For me, for example, I value community. Another big value for me is like life, the cycles of life, which is something that's very special for me as well. It came because I saw my kids being born, and like, wow, this is incredible. How life starts, and this little human, now I have to take care of that human. So it really inspired me, and it really changed my world, changed my art. So I have my story, my influences, and my values. And out of those three, I can make any wonderful story, of any of my paintings. So for example, if I have this painting right here, I can talk about how I am inspired by the cycles of life. So this figure almost takes the shape of or like being born underground. You see that's the top of the horizon line. So he's like being born underground. Also, there are heavy textures in this painting, implying that he is like underground, right? It's part of the earth almost as well. There's also a defiance in gravity, and these lines, the dripping paint that kind of pull the gravity down. So he's kind of like defying gravity, trying to emerge, right? So that comes from my love with this idea of the cycles of life, how life begins and continues to evolve. So I can, talk a whole story about this, or maybe can think of it of a memory that maybe I had, some sort or a dream of some sort, related to these things, either to my influences or some part of my story or something I value. You have here, for example, this painting, which now the figure, this one is a female figure, the figure is floating, right? Almost like in a dream, right? Because none of us can float. We are attached to the ground, right? We are kind of attached to the ground. And in my paintings, I love like these floating figures, like figures that defy gravity. And there's some spiritual component to that, which is very important in my work today, as well. And it's also very important in my story. Faith is a very important part of my story. So those things, also relate to my work. So I can talk about that, in terms of creating a mini story about it without having to tell you exactly what's the meaning of this work. Because I guess, again, I like when a person looks at the art and can bring their own ideas, their own experiences, and create their own meaning out of what I'm painting right here. And the same can be done even with more abstract artwork. Sometimes say, well, Sergio, I don't do, figures or stories or things like that. And in fact, these are not specific stories, uh, that I was trying to create. For me, they're more like moments and ideas. But even in a more abstract, type of art, this one is a beautiful painting by Chicago-based artist Sally Coe. And in this work, even if you are an artist who is an intuitive abstract painter, for example, you can still talk about your stories because you can pick up from your story, from your values, or from your influences and say something about that. What influenced you to think, abstraction, to or think emotions, or to think about, what you feel and how that relates to the colors that you're using, for example, right? So there are many things that you can still pull from, even though, your art may not specifically tell a story. But by using my branding framework, now you are able to say something, about your art that people can start connecting with. And I always, when I talk about my art, although, I'm trying to say something personal about the work, I also don't want to making it overly personal, so that people can also see themselves in the art. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So I have this painting right here, which is a painting where, I was inspired on this painting when I was in the backyard in my house when I used to live in Indiana. And then I wanted to take down the swing because it was taking too much space in the backyard. So I told my daughter, she was already 13, she wasn't using the swing anymore. I'm like, hey, I'm going to take the swing down. Nobody's using it, just taking up space. It's hard to cut the grass around. I'm just going to take it down. So she's like, no, 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 don't take it down. Let me go in it one more time. So she went in the swing, and that's when she, got on the swing, and I took a picture of her in the swing, and I thought, oh, one day I want to make a painting out of it. So I actually got to do that, and I made a painting, and here's the painting, based on my daughter. So beautiful flowers all around it, and her silhouette, exactly as, it was in the picture. So, but when I talk about this painting, I talk about, how we all as kids have memories of the swing. If you love the swing as I did, when I was a kid, there are special memories, right? So I say that, this was inspired by my daughter, but specifically I said it could be anyone's daughter, right? It could be your own daughter, your niece, your sister, or someone that that has been on a swing, and the beautiful dreams that we have while we are in the swing. And that way, my story, right, which is something very personal moment, it becomes also open to the viewer's experience in their swing, or the viewer's ideas, or family members, or somebody that they may know that has also may have a great memory of the swing. And in fact, this is one of the most favorite paintings here in the show right now, because people connect to that, and I have that actually little story right here, next to the painting. So, and I found that people do read those stories, and they do find a stronger connection with the artwork. So if you are an artist right now and you're watching this, you're thinking like, yeah, story is an important thing. Yes, I agree, and you're having a hard time putting those stories together. I hope this framework can help you. Again, your story, your influences, your values. Pick one of them or two of them whenever you want to talk about any of your pieces that you're sharing in social media, and there you go. You don't have to specifically create a description of your art. If you can use any of those in combination or individually, it's a great way to introduce people to your art. Just an example. Let's say I'm gonna post this one on Instagram, and I say, hey guys, let me tell you a story. When I was, I don't know, maybe I was 15 or so, and I had these dreams of, etc. Right? I can talk about an experience from my story while I'm sharing this painting, and so people who read that, they will connect with the work and with the story if that's something that is attractive to them, or that they can also see themselves in that story. So I hope, my friend, this is helpful for you as you start thinking about your own stories and how you can apply that in your own marketing. Because you can do it. You totally can do it. And please let me know in the comments what you think about this. What do you think of it? I think something that we can all relate to, right? It's something we can always get better at, telling our individual stories. And if you want to continue working with me, my friends, you know that I have the program Beyond the 9 to 5 right now, which helps artists who are in the process of transitioning from a day job full-time into an art career. Well, you can always reach out, check out our program Beyond the 9 to 5, which is part of the Art Next Level program, where we can help you make that transition, get all the steps that you need to take your art career to the next level. That's what we do at the Artist Next Level program. We help you take it to the next level, to go from a part-time or full-time job into a fulfilling art career.
But wait, before you leave this video, if you are an artist who wants to grow your art career and wants to achieve greater success, make sure you check out the Art Next Level program. You will find a link under this video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the next video that we have recommended just for you.